Hello and welcome to another episode of Snakes Territory, part of the Foul Territory Network. As always, be sure to like this video if you're joining us on YouTube, subscribe to our channel, maybe leave us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcast. I'm Jesse Friedman alongside Jack Sommers. And Jack, how was it out at Salt River Fields today? Did you wear your sunscreen this time around?
Well, I spent most of my time indoors in the clubhouse and indoors talking to Tori. So I managed to stay out of the sun most of the day today, actually. I wasn't actually watching the workouts because I got there a little bit late. But you definitely felt a different vibe, on the eve of games beginning. And it's not for keeps yet, but it is for the guys fighting for roster spots. And we sure got a lot to talk about in that realm.
Should be a lot of fun to see like actual baseball happening. We get our first Cactus League action on Friday. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the show. But Jack, our task on this episode is to attempt to project the Diamondbacks opening day roster. We are going to do our best. We've tried this before in the past couple of weeks. We are going to do it again. Before we jump into that, though, I do also want to say that we have a special guest joining us later on this episode. Diamondbacks pitching prospect Hayden Durke will be joining me toward the end of this episode. So be sure to stick around for that. Really great conversation with a D-backs pitching prospect who I think really has a chance to contribute out of the bullpen at some point this season. So with that said, Jack, we jump in to our roster projection. We're starting with the starting pitching, and we already have questions to answer with, of course, Merrill Kelly, Zach Gallen, Ryan Nelson. Those are the three guys you feel slam dunk. As long as they're healthy, they're going to be in there. I know there are jokes to be made about Ryan Nelson. He's going to be in the starting rotation. The Diamondbacks are not going to move him to the bullpen, but they're in red at the bottom of the screen. We have two guys that we think will be in the rotation, Eduardo Rodriguez and Brandon Pfaadt. But of course, there's another competitor here in Michael Soroka that as of a few days ago, before the D-backs brought in Zach Gallen, we very much figured Soroka would be in this mix, and I think he still has a shot to do that.
Yeah, and certainly he's not ceding any ground when it comes to that. And it was interesting that Nick Picoro the other day, I think he wrote that he raised the specter or the possibility of Eduardo Rodriguez being sent to the bullpen or Brandon Pfaadt being sent to AAA. I have a really hard time imagining that last one. I mean, the team, they're locked in. They gave him an extension. That's just going to be the last thing in the world they're going to want to do. Same with Erod. I just can't imagine what things would be like in that clubhouse if they sent Erod to the bullpen to start the season. But they also signed Michael Soroka as a starting pitcher. So that's going to be a tough nut to crack. It just depends, if everybody's healthy, right? We have a long ways to go to see if they all make it to March 26th in good physical shape and nobody needing some time off.
I'm with you in that imagining Erod going to the bullpen, it's very possible that's the move the Diamondbacks should make, but it's almost impossible for me to imagine them actually doing that, at least at this stage, at the very, very beginning of the season. Brandon Pfaadt, I don't really see the D-backs moving him to the bullpen either. What I think is maybe more likely with Brandon Pfaadt, although as I'm saying this, it sounds crazy given the contract details you just mentioned, but for me, if I'm the D-backs and you decide that Brandon Pfaadt is the odd man out with the rotation, you might prefer to send him down to AAA where he can still make a start every 5 days and remain stretched out than move him to the bullpen. And inevitably, you're going to need more than 5 starters at some point. So I think you'd probably want him to be stretched out and have him ready to go, because even if he were to start out of the rotation, you would still be expecting to need him during the season.
I think there's a lot of discussion that we could have about why that might be the better way to go, but I don't believe that'll happen. I just can't see it.
Yeah. And that leads us to what we think will happen as of right now, which is Michael Soroka moving to the bullpen. It's certainly a role that he has more recent experience in than any of these other guys. But Jack, I know you guys also talked to Michael Soroka today out at Salt River Fields, and he spoke on this. I'll start us off with this first quote. He said, my expectation is to help the team, and I think the best way that I can do that is to start. We've talked about that. That's why I signed here, and everything's going really well so far. To piggyback off that, Soroka said later, I'll do what I have to do, but I feel like it's been communicated pretty strongly that I think we all see me best suited as starting. And then he later said, we'll see moving forward." So this does not sound like someone who signed with the Diamondbacks being okay with moving to the bullpen on day one.
Well, he's certainly not. It sounds, talking to him, he's not ceding any ground. The comments that were made above were made in a group scrum. We call it a scrum when there's half a dozen reporters together. I kind of circled back and I went back and talked to him a little bit more. And, at the same time, I don't want to make it sound like he's not realistic. He understands the situation. In fact, he himself said, look, a team needs 8 starters. The Atlanta Braves needed 8 starters. The Los Angeles Dodgers needed 8 starters, and Arizona Diamondbacks need 8 starters. You're not getting through the season without 8, or more, almost every single team. So he fully articulated that point, and he totally gets it. I mean, he knows the situation. But I would just take it as he's a competitor, and he's not ceding any ground here, and he expects to be the one that gets to stay in the rotation. And he's just going to try to make their decision on that as tough as possible. I mean, I wouldn't overlook the fact that, that's why he was signed. That's what the discussions were. But he understands the what's going on here in camp as well. So, he was very chill and mellow. He was very Canadian about the whole thing. But I actually enjoyed talking to him. He's pretty chill. The first half of the conversation was all about hockey and USA taking the gold. So
yeah,
but he was philosophical about that too, and very much a good sport about it. He had a lot of fun with the other guys in the clubhouse talking about all that, and all the guys that like hockey were gathered around the TV, and there was a little bit of trash talking going on. So that was kind of a fun little add to that. You'll probably, if you haven't already, you'll probably see some of that on the news.
I maintain when it comes to this rotation discussion that, as unfortunate as it is, and as much as I hate to say this, injuries have a way of working these situations out. We've certainly seen it in the past. The D-backs the last couple years have had at least one starting pitcher go down during spring training. So that very well could happen again. And then, that solves this question pretty easily. But for the D-backs, you hope to have all 6 of these guys healthy. And if that's the case, Jack, I think it would be a difficult decision. Still hard, as we discussed earlier, though, to see the D-backs moving Eduardo Rodriguez or Brandon Pfaadt out of that mix in favor of Soroka.
Yep, I'd agree. So that's why we have that graphic up there as we do. These are all, just to reemphasize the caveat, everything here is based on guys being healthy. Obviously, if somebody's hurt, then things are going to change, and things are going to change anyway. This is version 2.0. There will be 3.0 and probably 4.0 before March 26th.
Moving on to the bullpen, of course, you see Soroka's name there at the bottom because if everyone is healthy, this is how we have things going right now. But your 4 names at the top, Jack, that we kind of feel are locks to a degree: Paul Sewald, Kevin Ginkel, Ryan Thompson, Taylor Clark. Those are your guys that are all on major league contracts. They're veterans. You're not sending any of those guys down or anything. So those are the 4 guys that seem you can pretty much lock those in right now. And then underneath those 4, we have Cade Stroud, guy the D-backs just traded a solid player in Blaze Alexander for. Hard to imagine them making that trade and then sending Stroud down to AAA. I think he has a really good chance to make the team. And then they're going to need, presumably, at least one lefty in the bullpen: Brandon Garcia and Philip Abner, the 2 primary options there. We have Brandon Garcia ahead of Abner on the depth chart, but certainly could go either way. And then that leaves only one bullpen spot remaining, Jack. A whole lot of options for that spot, but we have Jonathan Loaizaga based on his past history with New York. The fact that Gambo mentioned him the other day as maybe having a shot to be the D-backs closer at some point. He's the guy we have rounding out this group.
Yeah, obviously he's a non-roster invitee. He's not on the 40-man roster. It would require a 40-man roster move. We'll see by the time they get down there. They still have a couple of options, one or two options of guys that they could put on a 60-man, 60-day IL. Most notably, Tyler Locklear could be moved. So they do have a little room that they would be able to put him on the list on the roster without having to screw with the 40-man roster list. Just to emphasize, Sewell, Ginkel, Thompson, and Clark are out of minor league options. They cannot be optioned to the minor leagues. They would have to pass through DFA waivers and then accept an outright. And that's not going to happen with any of those four. So that's why those four are locks. There's no options. They're major league contracts. So there's still a lot of variability here. As we're going to get to, there's so many more options. It's very difficult to project. With Garcia and Abner, as Jesse said, we need a lefty. So let's just see, which one makes it. Obviously, we don't think that two of them will be in there.
In terms of other options that the D-backs have for their bullpen, there are a lot. We tried to capture some of them, but this is still not an all-encompassing list, even though there's 17 names listed here. But we'll run through some of them. On the 40-man roster, the D-backs have Dre Jameson, Andrew Hoffman, Grant Holman, Juan Murillo, Gilbert Diaz, Juan Burgos, Christian Mena, and Blake Walston, all as guys who are already on the 40-man roster, could easily be added to the major league team just from a roster standpoint. And then on the non-roster invitee side, we have Isaiah Campbell, John Curtis, Hayden Durke, who will be joining the show later in the episode, as I mentioned earlier, Spencer Geesting, Thomas Hatch, who is starting the Diamondbacks Cactus League opener on Friday, and then Bryce Jarvis and Taylor Rashi, a couple familiar names rounding out that list. So if it is the case, Jack, that the D-backs only really have one bullpen spot remaining, at least functionally, assuming Stroud is going to make the team and assuming you're going to have one lefty, either Brandon Garcia or Philip Abner, and you're going to have Michael Soroka, somebody like that in there as a long reliever. I mean, Jonathan Loaiza has a whole lot of competition for that last bullpen spot, if that's the case.
Yeah, there's a reason his name was in red on the previous page. As you look at these graphics, obviously anybody that's in red, we're not sure about. It's our best guess at this moment. When you look at this list, actually Blake Walston, I mean, he's kind of touch and go. I'm not really sure exactly when he's going to be ready, but we put him there because he is a lefty. He's on the list. He may not be ready for opening day. But I would expect him to be ready pretty early in the season, just in case. So his name is showing there. I just don't want to forget because there's not a lot of left-handed depth. When you look at the NRI list, some people may be wondering, well, where's Mitch Bratton? Where's Cole Drake? And Jesse and I discussed this before the show, and we kind of felt like those guys are really going to want to stay stretched out. They've got all these other relief options. The D-backs aren't going to mess with them and start turning them into relievers for an opening day roster spot. That's just not likely. However, Spencer Geesting is on this list because you see the L next to his name. And again, we're just putting it there because he's left-handed. So who knows where they're going to fall on this. I think they're probably just going to end up with one lefty on the roster, and I think it's going to be Brandon Garcia. And then everybody else is going to be righty. So they'll probably, go after the guy that maybe has a better reverse split or something like that.
Looking at the names on this list, I mean, we tried casually to do a kind of a ranking in our heads at one point. It's tough to know exactly how the Diamondbacks view all these guys. I think we can safely say you're going to see a lot of the guys on this list over the course of the season. I guess really the left side, the 40-man roster guys who are very likely to stay in the organization. Dre Jameson, I don't know exactly what he'll look like in spring training. It'll be very interesting to see. Obviously, the injuries have really stacked up on him the last couple years. But if he looks good, I mean, he has a career ERA in the mid-2s or something like that in the big league. So, the Diamondbacks would like to give him an opportunity. Andrew Hoffman did not put up good numbers after coming over in the Randall Grichuk trade last summer, but he has good stuff. I think he's another one of these young arms that we've heard Mike Hazen talk about, just trying to add volume to the organization. And then Grant Holman is someone the D-backs just picked up off waivers. We discussed him in our last show. Juan Murillo played a prominent role on the team last year. And Gilbert Diaz is a name that I think really has a chance to contribute to this bullpen at some point in 2026. I know 2025 was a really rough year for him, but down the stretch, he started to throw strikes again, and his stuff, we've seen the stuff. We know that it can play, especially in a bullpen role, and he looked pretty good in the Venezuelan Winter League as well. So for any of these guys that don't make the opening day roster, which it's going to be hard for like even two of these guys to make the opening day roster, but there's going to be opportunity over the course of the year.
Right. By the way, I just want to circle back. Christian Mena could also have been in that, Brad Drake bucket, along with Dylan Ray. You could put him in there as well. The only reason I kind of convinced Jesse to stick Mena on the list here was because he did pitch in relief in the major leagues. He showed up well. Very brief, small sample sizes, but he showed up very well and he looked impressive. Prior to the D-backs bringing back Zach Gallen, I actually had Mena as almost a lock for a long relief role in the opening day roster. But now that they have 6 starters, health willing, then that's kind of changed that calculus.
Do you think, would you put Christian Mena then as sort of number 7 on the starting pitching depth chart? If the 6 candidates that we discussed earlier are those guys we've already said, then you think you have Mena as number 7? Maybe he would be the long man if one of those other 6 starter options gets injured in spring training.
That was my mindset heading into the off season, heading into spring training, and so they haven't played any games yet. We haven't really seen anything. And we haven't really discussed him. So I would stick with that. If there was an injury, then I would rocket him up to a long relief option, and certainly somebody that they would need to be able to give them coverage, especially early in the season. Guys are still getting stretched out. You need somebody that can give you 3 innings.
Yeah. I think I'm right there with you. I think Christian Mena is a promising young pitcher. He's still remarkably young. It is easy to forget that Christian Mena is 22 years old, 23, I guess now. So yeah, he's definitely up there and probably gonna start some games for the Diamondbacks at some point in 2026. We're gonna flip over to the starting lineup side of things, look at the bench options, all of the many position players who have a shot to make this team. Before we do that, though, we do want to ask real quick, we would love it if you would subscribe to our channel here on YouTube. Drop a like on this video if you haven't already. Leave us a comment. We always enjoy hearing from you. And if you're joining us on an audio-only platform, it really helps us out if you would leave us a 5-star review. So thank you in advance for doing all of those things. Jack, moving on to the position player side of things, we have Corbin Carroll highlighted in red because who knows, maybe Corbin Carroll is going to have a rough spring training. And, if he goes out there and doesn't look great, then he might not make the team. No, obviously that's because Corbin Carroll is hurt and we might not see him play at all in spring training. But the hope is he's ready by opening day. From what we've heard, Jack, it seems like there's a chance that could happen. Like that, we know that he told our friends over on the main Foul Territory feed that he's targeting an opening day return. Seems like that is well within the realm of possibility.
I would go a step further. He's hell-bent on playing opening day. And they're going to have to hold him back with ropes and chains and not be on the opening day roster. Obviously, ultimately, he's going to start swinging a bat sooner than one would think. And look, I have some trepidation here, about they're saying you've already removed the broken hyoid bone. There's really nothing that he can injure further, and it's just a pain tolerance thing. It was interesting listening to him talk to AJ Przinsky, and Corbin was kind of like, yeah, it's just a matter of how much I can tolerate, and AJ's like, no, that thing's really going to hurt you. Corbin was like, okay, well, thanks for the advice. I'm kind of paraphrasing here, but if you watch the video, I think you pick up that vibe. I mean, so we'll see where that all ends up. I'm not counting him out. That's why he's on the list, but of course we're obligated to put him in red just because of the nature of the injury and the supposed timelines that go with it. But as of today, Corbin Carroll's probably going to be in the opening day lineup. I just think that's it.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, we've seen it in the past. We saw it last year. Corbin has never he's been the type of guy to try to play through injuries and be there for his team whenever he is able to. So he is not someone you want to bet against in these sorts of situations. Alongside Carroll in our projected lineup, we have Carlos Santana at first base, Cattell at second, Nolan Arenado at third, Perdomo at short. Left field, center field, kind of interchangeable here. We have Jordan Lawlar in left field, Alek Thomas in center. But as we'll talk about more here in a moment, Jordan Lawlar, this move to the outfield, it sounds like center field could be his primary position. We know Alek Thomas has gotten some reps in left field, will continue to get reps over the course of spring training in left field. But we have Lawlar in left and Thomas in center. And then, of course, Carroll in right and Pavin Smith at DH. So hard to say how the Diamondbacks view Thomas versus Lawlar in the outfield, Jack. We know that they want Thomas to get some run at both positions, and we know that Jordan Lawlar is going to get some run at both positions as well.
Yeah, as we discussed last show, I mean, the justification here of considering Lawlar in center is that it's an easier transition to learn outfield play from center. It's a little bit easier to pick up the ball, they think, as opposed to ball slicing and hooking away from a corner outfielder and learning how to play the corners. So, I think the flip side of that is the center fielder has to be confident that, he can direct traffic out there and call guys off balls in the gap. I kind of have, especially considering how injury prone Jordan has been, I have these visions and nightmares of, collisions in the gap with an experienced center fielder not knowing how and when to call off an oncoming freight train from one corner or the other. So I'm a little nervous about that interplay, but outside of that, I can see their rationale.
I might be overblowing this in my head, but part of the reason I have Lawlar in left field here and Thomas in center is, I mean, just imagining the environment at Dodger Stadium on opening day. I mean, the crowd that's going to be there, the noise that will be in that stadium. Are the D-backs really going to put Jordan Lawlar in the position to, to be the captain of the outfield? And as you're saying, to call off other guys over a ruckus crowd. It's a little hard for me to imagine them putting Lawlar in that position on day one. But again, they seem to think that center field might be an easier position for him to learn. So we'll see how that shakes out. Adding the bench pieces here to what you see, James McCann is, of course, the backup catcher. But then we've got three guys on the bench that we have in here now, but we have them in red because I think they're all fighting for roster spots. That's Ildemar Vargas, Tim Tawa, and Jorge Barosa. Of course, Vargas and Tawa, plenty of positional versatility there. Both of those guys able to play a number of positions in the infield and outfield. For Tawa, that includes even center field. And then Jorge Barosa, a solid defender at all three outfield positions, also out of minor league options at this point. So that probably gives Jorge Barosa an inside track to make the team. It's hard to imagine the D-backs cutting bait with him entirely after a rough spring training.
Right. Now, the key thing here, too, is backing up Geraldo Perdomo at shortstop. I spoke with Torey today during the media scrum with Torey, and I asked him, okay, if Jordan's primary role is going to be on the outfield grass, would you feel comfortable also having him as the only shortstop capable player on the roster other than Perdomo? And Torey knew what I was getting at. I didn't mention Ildemar Vargas, but, and then I just said, or would you feel like you needed to have one more shortstop capable player on the bench? And Torey kind of looked at me and he said, we're aware of that. Like the problem I'm discussing here, obviously they know about. Now, Ildemar Vargas is not on the 40-man roster. So he would require a 40-man roster move. And, there just aren't a lot of shortstop eligible players. There's also, uh, help me out here, Fernandez, right?
Yeah, Jose Fernandez.
Jose Fernandez, who's on the 40-man roster and is getting some really nice reviews in spring training, but he's not an option for opening day. And then there's a non-roster invitee in Jacob Amaya, which we're going to get to, and he's really just a depth option. It's really hard to see the team going into the season with only Jordan Lawlar capable of backing up Perdomo, even though Perdomo was expected to play over 150 games. So that's why Vargas is here. Also, I could have saved a lot of words. It just said Ildemar Vargas is inevitable.
Always. That is always the case for the Mike Hazen run Arizona Diamondbacks. Digging a little deeper on Jordan Lawlar, I know you had a longer conversation with him today, was able to catch up with him one-on-one. I'll read a quote from that conversation. This is Lawlar talking about his position this year and the evolution there and just kind of his approach. He said, "I feel athletic. That's kind of my theme this whole year, as athletic, just be athletic, whether it's outfield, infield, in the box, just let my athleticism work. And that's kind of how I feel." And this totally makes sense. I mean, Jordan Lawlar, the reason the Diamondbacks are taking this step of moving him to the outfield is that they believe he has the athleticism to do it. And we've seen them do this in the past as well. We've seen them move Chris Owings to center field and Ketel Marte once upon a time to center field. We saw it last year with Blaze Alexander as well. This is something the organization has done multiple times. And I would say on the whole, it's worked reasonably well. I mean, some guys better than others for sure. Worked really well with Blaze Alexander last year. And Jordan Lawlar seems like the type of guy who, like Blaze Alexander, he has the athleticism to be able to go out there and be a pretty decent outfielder from day one.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And apparently Dave McKay feels that way too.
Dave McKay also spoke about this. This is from Nick Picoro's story over at the Arizona Republic. He said he looks really, really good. That was McKay talking about Lawlar in the outfield. "We were out here earlier and there were a few balls that found him, but every day we're out there, we're doing more and more, and he's getting better and better and better." And of course, this has been a trend around the league as well, Jack. This is not just like a Diamondbacks thing. The Padres made what felt like a bold move with Jackson Merrill, converting a guy who just played in the infield in his professional career and said, "Hey, we're going to have you be our starting center fielder." And he's gone out and, become instantly one of the better defensive center fielders in the sport. So I don't know if you can count on that from Jordan Lawlar necessarily. It's going to be an adjustment, but certainly it is easier to go from infield to outfield than vice versa. And that's another point that Dave McKay made in his conversation with Nick.
Right. I also asked Jordan how he feels about maybe still playing some shortstop. By the way, he's on what they call a 5-2 program. He's doing 5 days in the outfield, 2 days in the infield. So that's the distribution of his defensive work. So they're certainly still prepping him to play some infield. So I said, like if most of your focus is on playing the outfield, and then all of a sudden you have to come in and back up at shortstop, how are you feeling about that if you're going to be doing all your prep in the outfield? And he had a comment about that. It was very straightforward. "I've done it in the big leagues. I played it my whole life. If I need to play shortstop, I can play shortstop," Lawlar said. So that's, pretty straightforward there. Jordan Lawlar is not lacking for confidence. I know that he's had a slow start at the plate to his major league career and might have even had the yips a little bit. But when you talk to him, he never comes off as a guy that has any doubt in himself. And so, I think that stands to very well for him. Like I've never seen him waver in his self-confidence. So that gives me a little bit of hope that he will make quicker advancement than maybe a lot of people are thinking.
It's probably worth mentioning that Geraldo Perdomo started 161 games at shortstop last year. And so, it's not like you need somebody to play shortstop once a week. You expect Perdomo to be there basically every day. I imagine they might not want him to start 161 games again. Maybe they'd like to cut back at least a handful And of course, there's the possibility of an injury that you at least have to be prepared for. So you could imagine, though, like Lawlar making the transition to outfield and having that be his primary spot. But in an emergency situation, he could probably play shortstop for you, and that would be totally fine. So we'll see how the D-backs feel there.
I agree. I don't think they really want him playing much over 150 games at short.
Perdomo.
Yeah. Oh, by the
Yeah.
way, he looks even a little bigger to me this year than last year.
Yeah, it's been a trend with Perdomo. I mean, and to his credit, he turned it into 20 home runs a season ago. So that can be a good thing. But yeah, we'll see if it has an impact on his defense or his durability or any of those things. The other couple things I'll mention on this, Jack. Number one, Adrian Del Castillo is now expected to miss opening day with that left calf injury we referenced in our last show. Unfortunate news there. I know Adrian Del Castillo has really been through it from an injury standpoint the last couple years. It's not for sure he's going to miss opening day, but Torey Lovello, when asked about that, he seemed to think that was kind of the expectation at this point. The other thing I'll mention is the Diamondbacks could still make a trade, Jack. I still have not forgotten about that Gambo tweet from a week or two ago where he said the D-backs are on the hunt for a utility player to replace Blaze Alexander. And he mentioned trading some minor league depth in order to get that player. It kind of sounded like there was something in the works, maybe something close on that front. So that's almost my expectation at this point, just given the confidence that Gambo seemed to speak with there.
And if they do that, it's almost certainly going to be a shortstop capable player. Originally, he was talking about, well, it'd be good if he can play the outfield. I don't think that's all that important at this juncture. I mean, they're a little thin in the outfield right now to start the season, but I just can't imagine that long term they really need to get a guy that has to be able to play some outfield. They need a guy to play shortstop.
There are lots of other position players who have a shot here as well. We'll jump into this list. I guess it's not as long of a list as on the bullpen side, that's for sure. But some other candidates for backup roles: Jacob Amaya, who played with the White Sox last year, is in camp as a non-roster invitee. Did play primarily shortstop a season ago, so that's mainly why he's on this list. Tommy Troy is not on the 40-man roster, but has played in AAA. I think it's probably more likely he would make the team in case of an injury, but he's at least in camp. As I said, has played in AAA, kind of right on the doorstep. And then in the outfield, the D-backs have a few options there as well. Christian Robinson, AJ Vukovic. Those guys are both in big league camp and in the organization for a long time. And then the big name, Ryan Waldschmidt, by many accounts, the Diamondbacks' overall prospect. The team has been very clear all along that he has a shot to make the team, that they are watching him closely. And not my baseline expectation, but he's in the mix as well for one of those outfield spots.
Yeah, I mean the one thing with Waldschmidt, it seems like they wouldn't want to start his clock if they didn't think that he was going to be able to stay on the team long term. And with Lourdes maybe coming back, early, maybe by the end of April, like you're not going to start Waldschmidt's clock in opening day just to send him back down May 1st when Lourdes comes back, for example. Whereas I don't think they would have that concern with Robinson or Vukovic. Now, look, Waldschmidt is an excellent prospect. He's really their number one prospect. Who knows? Maybe he just outplays Jordan Lawlar, and he's the one that makes the team, and Jordan goes back to AAA. I mean, we can't predict that, but I'm guessing that Waldschmidt probably starts the year in AAA. I mean, unless he hits 450 with 6 homers and makes great defensive play one after another and just says, hey, I'm here, I'm ready to play in the major leagues right now, put me on this darn roster. I mean, that's what it's going to take in my view. Otherwise, there's really not a whole lot of point to start his clock just for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I agree with you there. It feels like a classic situation where a team is genuinely like giving a top prospect a shot to blow them away, but it would really take a lot for the Diamondbacks to pull that trigger, even if Ryan Waldschmidt does look good in spring training. So either way, it's going to be fun to watch him, and you figure he's going to get plenty of playing time because like the entire Diamondbacks position player core is playing the World Baseball Classic, so there will be plenty of innings to go around in Cactus League play. Well, Jack, we've got a fun interview. That we'll get to here in a moment. Hayden Durke once again will be joining the show. Before we transition to that, though, Jack, any final thoughts here on this opening day roster projection stuff?
Well, I hope that our listeners will forgive us for hedging a little bit by putting a few guys in red. It's really impossible to nail it down. There's, at least a couple of two or three bullpen spots that are impossible to predict accurately, and there's lots of fluctuation and possibility here with the bench on the position player side. I mean, we have a guy on there that's not even on the 40-man roster, so we're going to come back. Though, as I promised at the outset, there will be a version 3.0, and hopefully, injuries won't be a driving factor in our next version of this. Hopefully, it'll be more revolving around how guys look.
Yeah, well, that is all. That is always the hope in spring training. D-backs have had a rough go the past couple years in terms of early season injuries. We'll see if they're able to avoid that this time around. Well, with that, just a quick preview: Hayden Durke, Diamondbacks 13th round draft pick back in 2023, showcased some really high end stuff. During his stints in the minor league so far, touched 3 minor league levels in 2025, going from high A up to triple A at the end of the season. Put up video game numbers in high A and double A, which I reference in our conversation. Got nicked up a little bit at triple A, had a 4.22 ERA for the season as a result of that. But again, the stuff is sensational, and you figure he definitely could play a role for this Diamondbacks bullpen at some point if he can kind of put things together. So without further ado, here is my conversation with D-backs pitching prospect Hayden Durke. We are so excited to have Diamondbacks pitching prospect Hayden Durke on the program. Hayden, first of all, thanks for the time. We really appreciate you hopping on.
Awesome. I appreciate you guys having me.
So, Hayden, I guess I'll start with the fact that you are in big league camp. You are here in Scottsdale. I imagine this is an opportunity you've been looking forward to for a long time. So what has it been like so far? I know it's just been a couple days, but what has it been like so far getting that experience?
I've enjoyed it so far. There's a lot of opportunity to learn and grow. Getting to be around big leaguers and future Hall of Famers in that locker room, it's a lot of opportunity to grow and kind of get out of it what you want, you know what I mean?
You mentioned, yeah, just getting to talk to some of the guys, including some future Hall of Famers. Are there any certain guys that you've had a chance to connect with a little bit and learn anything from, any conversations that stand out?
I wouldn't say none of the superstar guys, but like a lot of small talk here and there with, guys who've been in the league for a while. They got some time under their belt. And AAA, a little bit of time in the big leagues, kind of in the situation roughly where I'm gonna be in the next few years. So I've been in and out of conversations with those guys a lot more.
I guess I remember in the middle of last season, Hayden, I was looking at the numbers you'd put up in Hillsboro and in Amarillo, and it honestly kind of blew my mind. I was wondering, like, is there some kind of a misprint here? These seem like video game numbers that we don't often see. It was an ERA of like 1.4 or something like that, 54 strikeouts in 32 innings, 7 hits allowed. And then I know you got an opportunity to be up in AAA toward the end of the season. What do you feel has kind of clicked for you? I know you also had a lot of success in Visalia in 2024, but you've really moved up several levels since being drafted back in 2023. What do you think? What do you attribute all this success to?
I think everything kind of clicked for me. Everything mentally, physically, kind of clicked at the right time, and it kind of caused me to have a lot more confidence pitching, if that makes sense. The last few years throughout my college career, there was a lot of ups and downs, not a lot of building blocks. Like I'd do well for a while, then I'd have a bunch of bad ones in a row. It's nothing that
Hmm.
would just keep building on top of each other. I feel like I finally caught stride in Hillsboro, working with the pitching coordinators, the pitching coaches there, my teammates, having conversations with them, and just building and letting the big innings and big moments build on top of each other, and then kind of like letting the bad ones go as they came and kept working towards the goal at the same time.
There's a lot of talk in the Diamondbacks organization, something I've heard about many times over the years, about the very hitter friendly environments in Double A and in Triple A, Amarillo and Reno. I clearly in Amarillo that did not seem to be a deterrent for you, but I'm curious what your experience was like pitching in those two environments. Is that real? Does it seem overstated to you, or what was your experience like?
I'd definitely say you feel it a little bit. You don't get away with throwing things over the heart of the plate because when they do get hit, they travel a lot further. And then the playing surface in Reno's a lot bigger, so there's a lot more area for the ball to drop for base hits. Um, but at the end of the day, I feel like if you work ahead in the count, you might get beat some of the times, but majority of the time, if you control what you can control, you'll be in a decent spot. So
Yeah, I guess as long as you make sure that you kind of force them to beat you in those situations, I guess that seems like the way to go. What a
yeah,
lot of
right.
a lot of pitchers in your position have talked about. I guess just looking big picture at your 2025 season, I mean, it very much seemed like you had a shot down the stretch to potentially make your big league debut. I know there was an injury in there as well. But as you turn the page to 2026, like what are your goals? What do you kind of have in mind when you think about this season?
My biggest goal is to go out, have fun, get some innings under my belt, start from scratch. It's a new year. Last year doesn't count this year. So going out, proving myself, showing myself and others that I can continue to pitch the way I did last year, and do it time and time again. And like I said, just having fun. Really, it's just not getting too high or too low on myself at all times.
I was looking at some of the pitch arsenal metrics from Baseball Savant, which frankly I don't always trust what I see. But when it comes to your pitch arsenal, this is what I found. It had 5 different pitches tracked according to, this is all from AAA. That's where the data starts to show up for us publicly. I imagine this feels off, Hayden. I imagine maybe the cutter and slider got like misinterpreted as 2 pitches. Maybe the sinker and four seamer got like misinterpreted as 2 pitches. But because I don't fully trust what I see here, I would love to hear from the man himself. What is your arsenal actually consist of?
Right now, it's a four seam and then a gyro slider,
Okay.
which can turn into a cutter with the metrics that it reads, kind of like you see on that chart there. And then a spike curveball, 12-6 curveball. So it's a three pitch mix right now.
So the sinker is fake. That's Baseball Savant doing what Baseball Savant tends to do.
It might not be fake, right? I might have thrown some sinkers, but I wasn't trying to.
Okay, fair enough.
The
Fair
ball
enough.
might have did something a little funky and picked up weird on it and probably read as a sinker.
So you mentioned the gyro slider. That seems to be a really effective weapon for you. I'm curious with the curveball, what's kind of the intention there? Is that more of a strike throwing pitch? Is that a pitch that you're also trying to get some swing and miss with?
It's a hard pitch to throw in the strike zone, just because
Hmm.
its velocity is very high and there's so much movement on it. But that's kind of another goal I have this year for myself is landing that curveball. Getting it in the strike zone and then getting it out of the strike zone when I need to.
I imagine that comes into play for you, especially against lefties. Maybe you throw a few more curveballs to lefties, a few more sliders to righties, that kind of approach.
Yeah, it's kind of a mixed match. I try to do a good job of staying unpredictable to lefties and righties, and not relying too much maybe on one pitch in a certain area. I like to try and have confidence in all my pitches at all times, and kind of keep the pitch usages dead even. Fastball, slider, curveball, because they're three different pitches, but they all work together, do the same thing. So I try and keep it, in order and not get too highly used on one.
I read there was a scouting report over at Fangraphs that I was looking at. It mentioned that you just go out there and attack hitters. Like you're just going out there trying to throw your best stuff right by guys. Do you feel like that's a pretty fair explanation of kind of your approach when you're out there?
Well, 1000%. Yeah, no doubt. Especially since moving to the reliever role, you're asked to go out and get 3 outs. You know what I mean? So it's go and get those 3 outs as quickly as possible, as efficiently as possible. And the best way to do that is by attacking the zone with your best stuff. And no matter who's in the box, or if it's the best hitter in the world or one of the worst hitters in the world, attacking them all the same, not giving them the opportunity to take advantage of you, just always keeping the foot on the gas.
I imagine it had to be like a big confidence builder for you. I mean, I know Visalia seemed like sort of a breeze back in 2024. The numbers there were awesome. And then you got a little taste of Hillsborough toward the end of that season. Maybe that didn't go quite as well as you wanted, but then you come back the next season and you're dominating in Hillsborough, you're dominating in Amarillo. And I imagine that gives you confidence going into this season as well. Like, hey, if I pitch in AAA, like my stuff is going to play at this level. And, when you're up in the big leagues at some point, hopefully, I imagine you have confidence your stuff can play at that level too.
Yeah, no doubt. I think that's the biggest separator between all the levels, and especially like the AAA and big league level. A lot of those guys are older. They have more time, more baseball games under their belts. They've seen the situation multiple times, learned how to slow the game down. And I feel like you don't learn that until you kind of get years of experience under your belt. So I feel like as you hit each level, it might have seemed tough or might have seemed like it was a bumpy road, if that makes sense. But looking back at it, it's like, okay, that prepared me for this next level. This last level it got me ready for this one. You know what I mean?
What do you feel like are kind of the next steps for you in order to kind of finish up your journey here and hopefully get an opportunity in the big leagues before too long?
Just dominate the zone and controlling what I can control. Now, I can't control what happens after I release the pitch. If you think about it, you know what I mean. I can't control what happens if the hitter decides to swing or where he hits the ball. I can control my attack and my mentality and how I show up every day to the field and take care of my body to go through a long season. So I think that's going to be the big keys for me in order to take the next step.
I noticed looking at some of the numbers. Sometimes I nerd out over this stuff. I apologize, but I noticed that you've run pretty high ground ball rates in the minors as well throughout your journey. And at least for me, that wasn't like my first thought when I kind of thought about some of the things I'd read about your game and whatnot. The big fastball, the slider. But do you feel like that can kind of be a part of your game moving forward? That not only are you generating a lot of swing and miss, but you're also able to keep the ball on the ground?
No, most definitely. Because I'm typically a guy who's on the higher side of the walk rate spectrum than a lot of guys. So I feel like, a walk here and there backed by a ground ball, the next batter, turns into a lot of double plays sometimes. So it could definitely be beneficial for sure.
I imagine with the infield defense that the Diamondbacks have now assembled at the big league level, with Nolan Arenado now in their third base, Carlos Santana in there at first, Geraldo Perdomo and Ketel Marte, of course, up the middle. Like, if you get an opportunity in the big leagues, you probably feel pretty good about what's gonna happen
Right.
with those ground balls.
Yeah, no doubt. And even throughout the minor leagues, we have a bunch of good defensive infielders. Gino Groover, Tommy Troy. Those guys were kind of moving up the ranks at the same pace I was. So I got to play with those guys the entire time throughout my minor league career. Those guys take care of business behind me too. So it's, the D-backs do a good job with the infield of letting you feel very confident and going out there and just giving it your best and trusting that they have your back.
Has anything this is my last thing for Hayden. Has anything like surprised you about life in big league camp so far? Anything you didn't expect to see that you've seen?
I wouldn't say so, no. Maybe the food's a little different, but that's about it. Other than that, it's baseball. You know what I mean? It's like everybody shows up to the field every day, does the same thing we do on the minor league side, different color pair of pants, but that's the only difference. It's just baseball. So same drills, same catch play. Everybody has the same goal. So
Do you get much opportunity to talk with Torey Lavello? I imagine it's a little tricky to maybe find that time this time of year.
I had a meeting with him this morning. It was more to go over like my player plan and goals for the season coming up.
Sure.
But one-on-one time, I wouldn't say much. We hey here and there, but he's rolling around. He's got 72 guys to look after at all times. He's trying to get his eyes on everybody and see what he's working with for the season too. So it's tough to kind of get your one-on-one time, especially like in full camp. Pitcher catcher reports before the hitters and position players
Sure.
got there is a little bit easier, but now that it's full swing, it's tough for sure. So.
Yeah, I guess he has his hands full a little bit this time of
Yeah.
year. Makes sense. Well, Hayden, this has been awesome. Thanks so much for taking some time to hop on here. We really appreciate it, and best of luck here the rest of the way in spring training.
Awesome, man. Well, I appreciate you guys having me.
Well, thanks again for tuning into this episode of Snakes Territory. Be sure to like this video on YouTube if you haven't already. Subscribe to our channel, hit the bell icon so you get notifications and never miss an episode. If you're joining us on an audio-only platform, once again, it really helps us out if you'd leave us a 5-star review. You can find us on social media as well. I am at Jesse N. Friedman. Jack is at ShoeWizard59. And our show is at Snakes Territory. You can find Jack's written work covering the Diamondbacks over at Arizona Diamondbacks on SI. And happy baseball season, everyone, as we have officially Cactus League play returning on Friday. Get to see real baseball games being played. We are excited to enjoy it along with you. So thank you again for being with us on this episode, and we'll be back with another edition of Snakes Territory very, very soon.